Hi there, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome. My name is Kim Bodemer. I'm the director of Talmid of Hebrew College, your home for adult learning. And I'm excited to welcome you today to our Grow session. Grow sessions are designed to be opportunities for all of you to gather and reflect, observe, and wrestle with important, relevant topics in our lives today through a Jewish lens. And today we're really excited to have the opportunity to learn with Jan Darsa as she presents the story of Israel and modern Zionism as seen through the eyes of the inhabitants of Israel. So let me tell you a little bit about Jan. Jan was the director of Jewish education at Facing History and Ourselves, and I get the feeling like many of you know her already from her work or in other areas of her life. She was the director for over 20 years and has developed curricula in the field of Holocaust history, Jewish life before World War II, and Israeli history. Her recent publications are Sacred Texts, Modern Questions, Connecting Ethics and History Through a Jewish Lens, and Colliding Dreams Study Guide. Janice taught in public and private high schools and Tufts University. She is a Jerusalem Fellow studying for 2 years in Jerusalem, and in 1991 was a scholar in residence in South Africa. In 2010, she received the Covenant Award for Excellence in Jewish Education, and she will be offering a course exploring Zionism this spring as part of Talmid of Hebrew College. And we are very, very grateful that Jan is sharing her insight with us today. And it feels like just the perfect way to start and kick off our growth series for 2025. Jan is going to explain the format of today's session, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jan.
Hi, it's nice to have you all here. I'm excited to have the opportunity to share with you some what I think are very interesting questions and materials on the topic of Israel, which is on so many of our minds. And I have really three purposes for today's session. One is to share what I think is an important film and some resources that go with it. I'll just tell you quickly a story. I got a call when I was working at Facing History from a couple of filmmakers I had worked with for study guides on films they had done dealing with Holocaust, life before the war, of the Jewish life before the war in Europe. And they came to me with this film called Colliding Dreams, which hence is the name of the course. And I thought the film was absolutely amazing, which, by the way, I'm going to show you an excerpt of it, but I just want you to know you can get the film on, it's on Amazon Prime, I believe, but it's definitely rentable for like $2.99. And it's definitely worth seeing. And I'm going to be using it in the course I'm going to be teaching in the spring. And I'll be sending everybody a link at that point for the film if you haven't seen it by then. So I'll be sharing a bit of that with you. And I will tell you also that it was a motivating factor for me to step down from my role at Facing History and to start working on the topic of Israel. I was up at the Schusterman Center at Brandeis, and I was convinced that Israel is an existential threat, under existential threat, and that I really needed to start thinking about how to teach that. So that became my passion for the last 7 years, although I still do teach Facing History upon occasion or some version of it. So the second purpose of being here with you today is to engage you in some important questions that I'd like you to think about. Obviously, we're not going to cover the whole topic in 1 hour. We're not even going to cover it in a 6-part series, but just begin to think about and mull over some questions. And thirdly, it's to encourage you to perhaps sign up for the course that I'll be teaching in the spring. So those are the purposes I have for today. It's not so easy in 45 minutes to kind of cover a topic, and just looking at the, the description of the class, which I think is the second slide. This session will explore the evolution of modern Zionism from a concept to a reality. We will examine the impact of modern Zionism and the Jewish national rebirth in its historic homeland, that has had on the Jewish national birth in its historic homeland, and the impact it has had on the people of the State of Israel. The history is one of the most important and dramatic stories of rebirth the world has ever seen, yet it is fraught with conflict. The very legitimacy of the Zionist idea and the State of Israel are questioned more today than ever before. By the way, I wrote up this description before October 7th last year. This class was already on the books to being taught before October 7th happened. As a matter of fact, the course was happening just a few days later. So I had to kind of shift my thinking about what I was going to do. The debate over Israel, triggered by the latest conflict, is often guided by emotion rather than substance, by fear, anger, or deep loyalty rather than an understanding of Zionism and its history. This session is an attempt to bring these issues and the questions they raise to the forefront of our conversation. Drawing on this celebrated documentary film, Colliding Dreams, we will begin to address the internal battles as well as the continuing conflict between Jews and Palestinians and Jews, attentive to the wide range of viewpoints. We will address such questions as what is Zionism, why does it take on a new significance in the 20th century, what challenges and opportunities did the establishment of a Jewish state create, how did the settler movement impact the conversation, and how does Israel balance the tension between a Jewish state and a democratic state, right? So 45 minutes and we'll be all done with these topics, right? So I have a question to ask you. I want you to, if you can take the slides off the screen for a minute, I wanted to ask you to do something for me. I want you to put in the chat how you first learned about Israel or Zionism. What was your first memory of how you encountered it? It could be anything from school, family, Hebrew school, newspaper, whatever. I just would love to see what some of your first encounters that you remember were with Israel. So if you could put that, do you all know how to use the chat feature? Yes? Okay. All right, so some of you have, I like the blue tzedakah box. I somehow remember that too, even though I never went to Hebrew school. But I'm curious to know, and it would be great if we had a lot of time to really discuss with you how you learned about Israel. What were some of the truths you were told, and what were some of the myths you were told? Maybe we could just take one or two. Do you know how to do your hand raising? If you go down to, let's see, on this, it's, where's the raise hand? Then I can get some order in here, and just tell me what you remember about when you first learned about Israel. What did you learn about it? So Marge.
Okay, have to unmute.
Yeah, you have to unmute. Yeah.
I remember my bubby putting a charm on my crib. I mean, I was that young, explaining the charm to me, that it was from Palestine and that someday it would be a place that we would go because it would be our Jewish homeland.
When she said it would be a place where we would go, did she mean we would go to live or we would go to visit? Do you remember?
I am not sure about that, to tell you the truth, but I do remember that when I was a very young child.
Okay. Allison?
My first experience was as a young child, and my grandparents, they were retired, of course. They would visit Israel, and it just seemed like this wonderful exotic trip. They would take photos of them floating in the Dead Sea and shopping in the souks, and it was very like, it was all positive. Every year for my birthday, they would donate to plant trees in Israel. So there was zero understanding of any conflict. It was all just, this is a magical place where Jews are from.
Mhm. Anybody else remember anything about their first learning, Bob?
Hi, Jan. How are you? I don't know if you remember me from
I do. Where do I know you from?
The Fragility of Democracy, of course.
Okay, okay.
So my mom was in Hashomer Tzair, her brother in Canada. Her brother actually didn't go to college and was in a chavurah that was planning to make Aliyah. This was pre-state. I was born in 1958, so I grew up with her stories and my father's refugee stories from World War II, Israel and Israel as the National Jewish Project was everywhere in our house. In 1966, we went to live in Israel for a year, ending right before the Six-Day War, et cetera, et cetera. Always with positive associations and with the Hadassah narrative, a land without a people for a people without a land, people without a land for a land without a people, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. I'm curious, how many of you learned about it either in a Jewish day school or a congregational school? Is there anyone who can speak to that? Because that would be a really important thing for those of us who never went to Jewish day school, perhaps, or didn't learn really about it till later, can talk about that. Is there anybody in this group of, how many are you? I don't know, that can talk about that at all? Bob? Your hand's
Sure.
still.
I went to a Hebrew day school. I went to a day school through 8th grade, interrupted by that 1 year in Israel. It was a it was monorthodox split curriculum, Hebrew and religious subjects in the morning, and secular subjects in the afternoon. And Israel was an important part of the curriculum. We had some teachers who had tattoos on their forearms from the Holocaust and had a certain perspective about the Jewish National Project. We had Hebrew teachers who were born in Israel, one in particular that I remember, and very simplistic narratives of what it was like. For example, one that I remember is, quote, "The Arabs are your friends during the day and they will stab you in the back at night."
Wow.
Why do I remember that? Because it's a striking statement, but it was probably made when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. And we used to plant trees every year. Karen Kayemet, we would get certificates. We could dedicate the trees. We all had the Karen Kayemet blue tzedakah box in the house. We attended an Orthodox synagogue which was Zionist in philosophy. It was just pervasive and always positive. And we were always the good guys in the story.
So there was no tension at all in the situation between some of the prevailing myths of the beauty and the miracle of coming home and the land without people for a people without land. There was no tension between that and some of the other things that we know.
Absolutely zero.
Okay.
It strikingly, even I remember in 1966 being in Jerusalem. We were living in Rehovot, but I was in Jerusalem with my family on a visit, and I remember my father pointing out Arabs, and I remember thinking to myself, how did they get here? That sort of thing, kind of like when you see these cartoons of a moose in the forest, and then a city grows up around the moose, and then the humans say, "Hey, how did you get here?" That's kind of what I remember thinking. That's how utterly uninformed it wasn't utterly uninformed. There was a particular narrative that didn't include that.
Anybody else in the group have another kind of experience?
Wonder if I could say something.
Sure, Shira. Sure.
My experience is similar to what the previous person was talking about, in the sense of it was really all over my life growing up, and yeah, all positive. I mean, sorry, but I think I wanted to share this, which I'm ambivalent about sharing but it's been in my mind lately and it popped into my head now. So I went to Israel when I was 10, so it was 1969 because my parents chose to go, and I always believed I was the youngest and they didn't trust my sisters to keep me alive while they were gone. So I went with them. We didn't have a lot of money and 3 of us went to Israel. But the reason I'm saying this is later in my father's life, so let's say another 15 or 20 years after that, he would go to Israel quite a bit. And I remember him coming home. I'm a Midwesterner. And he commented, he was kind of heartbroken. I mean, not heartbroken, but he commented, he said, Israelis don't pull over for an ambulance. They don't pull their cars over. And it was like the first, if you'll pardon my sharing that, I'm not, it was like the first crack. It was like, and he had become more conservative as he got older too. So it's not like he was abandoning Israel, but it was like, wait, they're not quite like us. There's so I just, that story came while, sorry, I don't see your name right in front of me. While the other person was talking, that story kind of popped into my head.
Yeah.
Bob, yeah. And so, but anyway, I have so many stories, I'll stop. But similar, it was just surround sound, and it was, of course, all positive.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Rabbi Langton?
I have quite a different story. I know someone else on this group is also a convert. I converted in 1967 in April. I had learned about Israel before from my mother, whose parents were missionaries in Lebanon, and she was born there, and they visited Israel when she was a teenager. So I first heard about it when I was a child. I converted in April, and it was a perfect time because the Six-Day War happened in June. And I remember feeling so proud that I had joined this group that was so effective in preserving itself and holding on to a land that it had historic roots in. So that's my first real association with it.
Wow, thank you. Leslie. Where's Leslie? You had your hand up.
There I am.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to keep myself behind the screen in case I start coughing. So you all don't have to watch me coughing. But I've been going to Israel for over 50 years now. I have native Israeli friends anywhere from 35 to 52 years. But one picture that came into my mind while you were talking was during the Six-Day War. I was in 5th grade and I was in charge of putting information up on the bulletin board in the hallway outside of our classroom. I think I said 6th grade, I was in 5th. And I ended up making the entire bulletin board newspaper articles about the Six-Day War because I was so scared and it was so important to me. And I remember the teacher coming out one day, taking a look at what I was putting up and looking at me and smiling and walking back into the classroom. And I always felt like that was a signal of the subject that I was doing was okay.
Okay. It's interesting that one of the things I'm going to share with you, just a 5-minute clip of, and it's 10 years old. So I want to preface this by saying it's 10 years old. It's a film that was made by students called Between the Lines, and their students. Has anyone heard of it? I don't know if you've heard of it, but they wanted to interview students who graduated from Jewish day schools to see how they were taught about Israel and how they were feeling about it. And this, again, putting it in perspective that this was 10 years ago and that things could very well have changed in the last 10 years. And if anyone has any experience with that, I'd like to hear. But I just want you to see what they're saying and how they're feeling, and then we'll come back together. So I think that's on slide. Yeah, 5 or 6. Keep going. One more.
Sorry, you want to show between the lines now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Give me 1 second. Thanks for your patience.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict rages on, the world really questions Israel's actions and its treatment of the Palestinian people. Younger generations of Jews are really looking for answers. I went to Jewish day school. I see my friends and other alumni really struggling with what to think about Israel. As sites where the future Jewish leaders of tomorrow are being cultivated, what Jewish day school students are taught then becomes especially important. We went across the country and interviewed Jewish day school students, rabbis, teachers, thought leaders, to really dig into the way Israel is taught in these Jewish day schools and what it means.
We learned a lot.
We learned a lot. We wanted to learn from Jewish day school participants what their experiences were like firsthand.
My name is Leanne Gale, and I went to Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island from elementary through high school.
Hi, my name is Simone Zimmerman. I went to Jewish day school my entire life, K through 12.
I am Mr. Kurtz. I go to the University of Pennsylvania. I've been going to Jewish day school my whole life.
I'm Talia Stolzenberg Myers. I study history at Barnard, and I went to Jewish day school my whole life. I think that in both latent and less direct ways, there was a very particular sense of how we talk about Israel that was communicated on in the space of our school.
To me, I keep this in mind. When I am talking about Israel, I am speaking about someone's mother. That is the emotional connection. That's the connection that most of my students have. And it is very powerful.
So I think one of the main issues that makes teaching Israel in the classroom so difficult is because people come to the classroom with not only pre-established ideas, but pre-established emotions that they're not willing to easily let go of.
We promote a connection to Israel on an emotional level in many, many ways. In speakers that come in during the celebration of independence, we line the school with Israeli flags.
We did all of the different celebrations, and so I distinctly remember in elementary school, Yom HaAtzmaut was the Israeli Independence Day, was one of my most favorite times of the year, because we would all come back to school after a full school day. It would be warm out, we would have this huge barbecue, Israeli dancing, Israeli food. All of the kids who have Israeli parents would be there with their families, and it would be like their moment to shine, and they would be kind of leading the activities, and we would have a great time. And for us, the cultural activities really just made us feel like Israel is a fun place, Israel is a validating place where you can express your Judaism in a fun way. That's not just day school, it's not just Torah, it's actually lived experience.
I think that support of Israel or love of Israel definitely expanded beyond the realm of intellectual thought. It was very much so part of the social dynamic of the space. It was the default.
Students who might want to offer a critical perspective are generally not made to feel 100% welcome doing that.
The motto of my high school was inspire and challenge, and obviously the inspiration is more of an educational motto, but the challenge aspect was supposed to be about introducing complexity into things, and I think that complexity is lost when it came to the Israel discussion, when it came to the Israel, whatever, almost curriculum, whatever you want to call it, And it was a little bit insulting because we were expected to be challenged in so many other aspects and to think critically about these things, even historical narratives. But when it came to Israel, it wasn't so much of a discussion as much of it was a, this is what happened and this is why we are so great, and thus this is what needs to happen in the future.
The acceptable discourse was just basically, we love Israel, period.
We met students who felt Israel was taught differently to them than other subjects. It carried a different weight. How did this standard get set?
As no progress is made in peace talks between Israelis and Palestinians, the idea of Israel and Palestine has really moved to the forefront of a lot of international dialogue, which has then increased levels of concern or even anxiety in a lot of day school curricula. So the pro-Palestinian movement has gained some strength over the last few years, which has then increased the desire inside schools for there to be a narrative that really represents Zionism in the best positive light. And so there's really been a broad effort that I've seen across the political spectrum inside the Jewish community to make sure that Israel is taught and spoken about and addressed in the best way possible.
Why do you think the Jewish community as a whole is so tied to this more right-wing?
Okay. All right. So it's interesting to hear young people who feel, as one of my children says, that they feel duped. They feel like, you know, she didn't go to a Jewish day school after the first grade, but she was in a congregational learning experience all the way through high school. And she says she feels duped and she is angry and feels very much like she needs to be out protesting. My other daughter, who went to a Jewish day school, K through 8, and was 2 years at a day school, a regular school in Israel, feels completely the opposite, totally. When the war broke out, she took off for Israel. She went to cook on one of the kibbutzim in the south right near Kibbutz Be'eri, which was attacked. And she cooked for soldiers and elderly people for 2 weeks, left her 4 kids to do this. So, you know, even within families, you have people coming from different places and having very different experiences. And I know for us as a family, it's very hard to sit around the holiday table and to have a conversation about this. And so you can imagine how difficult it is for teachers. That one teacher who said, when I talk about Israel, it's like talking about someone's mother. And, you know, it becomes a very difficult and charged subject. The previous rabbi where I was wouldn't discuss Israel. Our current rabbi discusses it very openly and discusses her political leanings without fear or favor. And she's lost some congregants, but that's just the way it is as far as she feels. So this is a difficult topic. So I'm sort of just putting this out there for you to understand that when we come together to really delve in a 6-week or 8-week program, you know, we have to respect the space, respect each other, and really learn to create a safe space and to hear each other. And that goes even for today. You know, it's easy in many cases, the schools the public schools certainly don't even deal with the topic. I don't know if anybody in here, it'd be interesting to hear, has ever learned anything about Israel in their public school education. I'm very curious if there's a hand in these 32 people that are here of somebody who's actually had an experience in public school with Israel. Allison?
I myself did not have an experience, but I do want to say that so I live in Oakland, California. I was born and raised in Boston. Oakland is very left leaning in terms of politics. And within the OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, there has been a grotesque display of anti-Semitism, and the discussion around Israel coming from the teachers union, coming from teachers. There's been a lot of very loud voices that have been very, Israel is conducting genocide, it's an apartheid state. they're colonialist settlers. Like every buzzword, every negative buzzword has been applied to Israel. It's not happening at my son's elementary school, but I have heard from other Jewish parents that their teachers in some classrooms have posted signs that equate. So the Star of David is the Israeli flag, right? With a sign like Star of David equals, and then a swastika. And just like things that would make your mind blow your mind, but it's somehow under the guise of like pro people of color. And there's a lot of manipulation of facts and history happening. So I wanted to jump in and say that it is happening, not with me, when I went to school, but it's out there in some of the public schools. And it's been a real issue with curriculum and how Palestine and Israel are taught. So I wanted to add that.
Right. It's interesting because, if we were just to take these two, this is too anecdotal to do this, but, you say the Jewish schools on the whole give a very positive, what somebody referred to in the film as right-wing leaning narrative. And in the public schools, especially now after the October 7th, ironically, that's October 7th, Israel was attacked. And yet there's been a lot of anti-Israel narratives that have been going on, particularly in the college campuses. And how do we prepare our young people to go onto the college campuses and speak about Israel in an intelligent way if, all they've learned is the holidays, Israeli food, dance, planting trees, and they haven't learned some of the difficult and challenging parts of Israel. And what's so, I think, important and exciting about this particular film is that it brings in the voices. It's kind of looking at the narrative of Zionism through the voices of the people that live there. And the film directors have tried really hard to capture such a wide variety of voices, from settlement Jews, Messianic Jews, to left-wing, socialist Jews, founders of the kibbutz movement, to Arabs in the West Bank, talking about their impressions of Zionism and Israel. And it allows for all these different voices and for us to talk about not just the facts. I mean, we do, it's important to know the facts. What are the pivotal moments in Israel? Where do we begin the story of Israel? Do we begin at Sinai? Do we begin with the exodus of the Jews from Egypt into Canaan? Or do we start with modern Zionism, looking at the Zionist convention in the 19th century and the rising nationalism among the Jews? Do we start with the first, second, and third aliyot? Where do we start with the story? And when does the story begin to shift? And when does the view start to shift? And if you look at the other pivotal points, not just the War of Independence, but looking at the Six-Day War, which is such an incredibly pivotal moment in Israel history, the 73 War, which really launched the intense beginning of the settler movement, looking at the assassination of Rabin and how that changed the discussion in Israel. And then today, I mean, it is fraught with all kinds of ways to think about these questions. So, you can study that. You can look at things like the, what are the origins of Zionism? What's the rationale for modern Zionism, and what are some of its goals? Modern Zionism, we're talking, the 19th century. What's the connection between modern Zionism and biblical liturgy? Where does that intersect? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities for the Jews to come home after the Holocaust, where the major aliyot started coming into Israel? And these all had amazing impacts on the society. So those are the things that, of course, if we had more time, we'd like to explore. We'd like to explore what are the different types of Zionism. Labor Zionism, socialist Zionism, political Zionism, diaspora Zionism, religious and messianic Zionism. There's all these different kinds of Zionisms that motivated people to embrace Israel, to want to either go to Israel or to send their support to Israel. So these are the kinds of things that academically, often you'll find if somebody does touch on Israel, they touch on that. But what about the deeper issues, the issues that really get at what I call, you when you're teaching, you want to teach head and you want to teach heart. You want to look at a pedagogical triangle and say, okay, what are the historical events and the consequences of those events? What are the emotional and social learning aspects of that? And what are the spiritual aspects of that? And you want to tie those all together to really make meaning out of history. And that's, what I'm trying to do in my journey as I've launched into this sort of second career. And what I call what those kids were talking about was what is the null curriculum, the curriculum that isn't taught. It's the curriculum we learned when we were growing up in school, many of us. I mean, I grew up in California. I also I moved to Boston, so we traded places, Allison. And we never learned about, we'd go to visit the Native American Museum, and weren't they an adorable people with their teepees? And, this is how we learned it. We never heard the word genocide in reference to what we did to the Native Americans. California was the major transport station of the Japanese Americans who were put in internment camps in the Second World War. My mother went to high school at an LA high school where they deported the Japanese, and all she remembers from that period was that kids walked around school wearing signs that said, "I am Korean," so they wouldn't be mistaken for Japanese, but knew nothing about these internment camps. So we also didn't learn about our own history. So how do we repair that? Somebody mentioned, the first crack. Who was it who said that when the people didn't pull over for ambulances, and then just begin to see many cracks that come about. So I want you to take a look at the first 5 minutes or so of the film that I used to explore the class. And just by the way, so some great resources. One of the resources I used to go along with the film is Can We Talk About Israel? Daniel Sokich, who was the head of the New Israel Fund, has written, and it's a great primer on Israel. It's not a heavily academic book, but it's really readable and an enjoyable read, and it gives you a lot to think about. And there's a lot. I put a reference page in which will send you of books I think that are really good. Somebody mentioned the 6-Day War and the book by Micah Goodman, Catch 67, which talks about the shift in Israeli thinking at that point. But let's take a look at the film, and then let's talk a little bit about some of the quotes from the film. This is Colliding Dreams.
There's the Hebrew word tikkun. Tikkun is a very spiritual word from the ancient Hebrew culture. It doesn't exist in any other language. Tikkun is a whole process that takes years. How do you reform yourself after you've been broken?
What Zionists wanted to do was to normalize Jewish existence, to put an end to this feeling of a gulf separating Jews and other people, to make us like other people. and to enable us to feel the kinship with other people that we hadn't felt in the past, because we were always super conscious of our differences. And Zionism, in this sense, was really an attempt to bring about a revolution in Jewish life. But on the whole, I would have liked to see the Zionist revolution go further and succeed more.
I heard once somebody describing Zionism as a person escaping a burning building, jumping out of the window and falling on somebody else's head. I think that's a fair description of Zionism. I mean, it's materialized in a very critical moment, I think, in the Jewish history, but we never really dealt with the consequences.
A couple of years ago, my wife and I noticed lots of bulldozers on the hills there. And gradually we saw the outlines of these concrete slabs, and it eventually formed a wall. On the one hand, that wall has helped keep my children safe in the city, but it really represents the opposite of everything that I dream of in terms of Israel finding its place in the Middle East. That wall is a tragedy for both peoples, but I have no guilt for that wall. That wall did not have to be there.
If we are not here because of what's written in the Bible, if we are not here because this is the land that God promised to the Jewish people, then we have no good reason to live here. We are the soldiers of this messianic period in time. We have to win these wars. Nobody will win it for us. Then, when we will be able to win all the wars and to build the temple, then we will know that Messiah came.
Zionism succeeded in building a powerful country. It is the strongest militarily in the region. It has scientific achievements. It could draw on brains and mindsets from all over the world. And you could look at Israel and say it's a success story. Superficially it is, but where has it failed? It has failed because it existed on the negation of the Palestinians as human beings with rights, with a history, with a culture. It is extremely oppressive also because it is exclusive.
I still remember the years that coming from Israel was something that was envious. People will ask you about Israel, about the kibbutz, about the new reality, and it was very attractive and seemed so glamorous and so just and so worthy. And it turned into something people are shy about, and not speaking Hebrew on the train or not being identified as Israelis. And it's a sad moment for us. This is exactly what we didn't want to happen, and it's happening.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim. Just think for a minute. Was there anything? I'm going to put some quotes up in a minute. But before I put some quotes up to give you something to bounce your ideas off of, I want you to think, was there a quote that was said in this that really grabbed you? And just jot it down or commit it to memory, because I'm going to come back to it in a minute. But so just take a minute to do that.
Jan, would you just remind us how old the film is?
It came out in 2017.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So here are 4 quotes from the film that I took. So if you didn't think of one on your own, you can pick one of these. I want you to just look at them. There's 4 different quotes. And just to tell you a little, Hillel Halkin is a writer. He's a kibbutznik. He's American. He was the first voice who spoke. Orly Noy was a big activist member of Peace Now movement. Aryeh Eldad is one of the leaders of the settlement movement. He was the one who expressed the Messiah coming and the temple being rebuilt. And the fourth is Hanan Ashrawi, who was very involved in the PLO. She's, I would say, a moderate Palestinian. I'll just tell you one quick story about this. This film played at the Coolidge Corner Theater, and they called and asked me and one of the film directors to come in and lead the discussion after the film was over. And you haven't seen the whole film, unless some of you maybe have, but the first person raises their hand and says, this is the most anti-Israeli film I have ever seen. And I'm really upset it's being shown here at the Coolidge. And then somebody else said, this is the most anti-Palestinian film I've ever seen. And it just is, we all come as Rorschach tests to the subject of Israel, as I said earlier. And, we bring different feelings and different histories and different experiences to this history. And so it's tricky, but that's why it's so good to be in a setting where we can talk about it. So now that you've had a chance, I'll give you one more minute to read these and pick one. I want to then ask you all to come back together so I can see your faces, or at least your names. And I can ask you a couple questions about these. So what clip in the film resonated with you? I'm just curious. Hi, Muriel. It's nice to see you. Even in the first 5 minutes, this film is so packed. You could do a 10-week course on this film and not finish the subject matter. I think every voice is so important. I had so much fun writing the study guide, and I took a 2-year course to prepare myself to do it. So I'd love to hear what you think of just these few voices you got to hear. So using the raised hand function, I'm counting on you to. Edie.
Yeah, what struck me most was the definition of Zionism as jumping out of the burning building and falling on someone's head, because the definition of Zionism that I always remember, and I think it did come from Hillel Halkin, I'm not really sure, somebody giving money to somebody else to give money to a third person to send a fourth person to Palestine. That was sort of what I grew up with.
Mm-hmm. I was also thinking when he said that of the of what Bob, I think it was Bob who said this, that your grandmother, that Israel was a land without people for a people without a land, but it wasn't a land without people. And we forget that, and we forget what happened to many of the people who lived there at the time when Israel was declared an independent state by the UN and, granted statehood. So, yeah. Who else? What else rang a bell in somebody's head?
And I just wanted to draw your attention to the chat. There are 2 comments in there.
Okay, let's see if I can. Oh.
I could read them too if it's helpful.
Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, okay. I got to the bottom.
Sure.
It's a
yeah, no problem.
Okay, who wrote it's a tragedy, but I don't feel guilt, as the one Bob?
That was Martha. Martha.
Oh, Martha. Can you say something about that, Martha?
You're muted, Martha.
Sorry. That was a quote from the man who was looking at the wall being built.
Yeah, Yossi Klein Halevi.
Yeah, he was like, well, this is really too bad, and so on and so forth, but it keeps my children safe. It's a tragedy, but I don't feel guilty. And it was just so much, I don't know, I don't know if it's ambivalence, but so many mixed feelings that he had. But I remember I was in Israel for a trip right before the pandemic happened, and we went past that wall, which is covered with graffiti, and I mean it's really it's very grim, that whole area. So
Yeah, how did you feel, Martha, about what he said?
I was struck by how ambivalent he was, and yeah, it was like he didn't feel like all one thing or the other. And I guess partly for me, having just seen that wall a few years ago, that's coloring my memories because it had so many intense feelings associated with it, and it's hard to ignore those feelings. And it's sort of like, well, how do you end up like feeling like, well, I don't feel guilty about it, or I don't know.
It might be interesting. I don't know if you're aware of the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, they have a podcast every week, and it's a conversation between Yossi Klein Halevi and Daniel Hartman, the head of the Hartman Institute. And Yossi's like his right hand. I don't know his exact position. And it's very interesting. I mean, he is a very conflicted. He doesn't live in the settlements. So he was a religious Jew, but modern Orthodox. And I'd say he's more to the left than the right. I don't know, but if you want to, you can read his book, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, which is fabulous.
I know of that book. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah, I was actually going to cite that same quote as one of them. I didn't hear it as ambivalent so much as sad. The wall is there because of the Intifada. The Israeli government didn't set out to build that wall. In fact, it created a green line when for years it had argued that there is no such thing as a green line. But I guess I was also struck by the falling out of the burning building quote, or as somebody who I used to work with who is of Arab heritage said, a people whose land was stolen went and stole other people's land. And I think that's very simplistic. First of all, Zionism didn't start with the Holocaust. It started in a context of nationalist movements and isms that predated Zionism, at least the real beginning of Zionism that I date with Herzl, by at least 60 years. And at some point, I think moral discussions have to take a back seat to practicality. We don't see the world wringing its hands over a Holocaust in Syria that was vastly worse than what's happening now, or Sudan, or any of these other places. It seems to be we who struggle with these issues the most. And one wonders then how much of the attention on Israel is, while tragic from the Palestinian perspective, par for the course on the world. And the world has shown us that we can't be trusted. Our futures can't be trusted to the world because of how the world has treated us. And therefore, yeah, the wall didn't need to be there, but it does it didn't have to be this way, but we deserve to have a wall around us, whether it's a wall of soldiers or a wall of stone or a wall of mutual respect, which we've not had. And therefore we have the other two.
Very thoughtful. And, whether you agree with Bob or not, I think it's very important what he's saying. I noticed that somebody said the calm voice of the messianic speaker. It's so palpable in a voice like that and resonates with our history culture. And then you catch yourself. Shira, this is great. Tell me more.
Well, it's just how I felt. You started us off with how were we raised and what did we hear? By the way, I just have to say, firmly on the left and firmly in support of Israel. Just want to say that. But it was weird listening to him going, it's kind of familiar. It's not completely foreign to me. And then I realized who he was and went, wait, no, that's not okay at all in my, book, in the sense of that's not an okay way to see things. So that it was just weird because it's drawing on all the stuff that it's in our, we read it in our Torah every week. I mean, if you go to services. And I also just wanted to comment on the wall, that talking about that reminded me that when it went up, it was heartbreaking in that moment. It was not just heartbreaking, it was hard to believe. It felt beyond, ironically, beyond the pale. It felt, there's no way that that's what could happen in Israel. That's how I felt at the time. And then it just becomes part of the deal.
Well, I thank you all for being great participants and, engaging with me on this very brief, and I hope if you came here expecting a lecture on, the history of Israel and Zionism, I know you must be very disappointed, but I'm not disappointed, because I love to hear your voices and what you're thinking. And what I do promise is, if you sign up for the class in the spring, that we'll have much more time to delve deeper into some of these questions, and have a chance to really talk to each other. And we'll send you the link for the kids video, the one between the lines. We'll send you some resources that I've put a page in on the slideshow. And if you want to rent the film and see it, even if you're going to sign up for the class, I'm going to ask everyone to watch the film ahead of class. So if you want to watch it early, you just have to rent it for $2.99 or something. Is there anything else, Kim, you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up. So, Jan, thank you so much for a really thought-provoking conversation, the beginning of, I think, hopefully many conversations. And thank you everyone for joining us today. My colleague Laura Tarlin has put in the chat the link directly to Jan's class if you're interested in registering now. It doesn't start until April. And there's lots of other courses that we are offering, some on Israel and some on other topics. We really appreciate you learning with us. And I want to just let you know that we have a bonus grow at the end of this month on the 29th of January with Rabbi Rachel Edelman. Keeping with the theme of Israel, she's actually going to talk about, it's called In God's Breath, Hovered Over the Face of the Deep, Modern Midrashic Response to October 7th. We'll send you a description of that session along with a link to register. And we are just so thrilled to be able to gather monthly or almost monthly for these sessions. We wish you a wonderful rest of the day.
Kim, this is Elaine. I'm sorry, I had to log in late and I do not
Yes.
know the name of the film. Could you just tell me the name of the film so I can?
Colliding
Yeah,
Dreams.
Jan, do you want to say?
Yeah, Colliding Dreams.
I'm sorry,
Colliding Dreams.
Lighting Dream.
Colliding, yeah.
Colliding. We're
I'll
going to
put it-
send, Elaine, we're going to send a copy of the recording along with all of these resources in a follow-up email. So you'll get it. Don't worry. It should come out either later today or tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And here it is in the chat.